Welcome to Talking with the Experts. Here we discuss all things business, by business owners, for business owners. Here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Do you know what effective leadership is and how to build high-performing teams? My next guest, Rebecca Vickers, is going to discuss with us leadership, marketing and operations, and team building. Hello, I'm your host, Rose Davidson, from rosedavidson.com.au. Rebecca is a dynamic professional with experience in both digital marketing and operations. As a VP of operations at FMO Media, she thrives on coaching her team, cultivating client relationships, devising successful strategies, and developing effective systems. She's a firm believer in empowering others. Rebecca's goal is to foster stronger leads, cohesive teams, and well-rounded individuals. Rebecca is a proud alumni of Loyola University in Maryland and Villanova University as well. Rebecca, welcome to Talking with the Experts. It's lovely to meet you.
Thank you, Rose. You too. I'm so excited to be here with you.
You don't seem all that old, excuse me for saying so. How did you end up doing what you're doing?
Well, good Zoom filter, number one. But thank you. I've been blessed with a lot of great opportunities over the last 16 years of my more formal employment, and had the benefit of having really great leaders to show me the way and guide me. And then also having some maybe not so great leaders who didn't really know what they were doing either. And I give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think they ever really had anyone to teach them, but they also showed me the what not to do's when it comes to leadership and leading a team. And, along the way, whether it's been in my theater and film career, my fitness and sort of health pursuits, and then my marketing and operations, which has sort of been one of the through lines of the last decade plus, it's been a great opportunity to be able to be trusted with helping build systems and make improvements and being that entrepreneur for our company. So I take the compliment. It's very kind of you. I always say that God's not finished with me yet. I'm still learning and growing, and I have a lot more to learn, but I've had a lot of great experience just by being open and willing to grow within companies, and also seeing where I can add value too.
Yeah, adding value to any position that you're, working in is really, really important. And I guess that, a lot of employers don't take a lot of heed with that. They sort of overlook the people that are adding the value and look up to the people that are, sucking up to them, basically.
Yeah, there's a difference sometimes between showing and telling, and how are you showing that you're capable for leadership and showing that you are providing the value, and telling and maybe saying all the right things, but actions and words don't really align, and maybe even behavior doesn't align either with what you say you want, and what your pursuits might be, and then your behavior and your work ethic alongside of that too. And one of the things that I just come back to is the idea of servant leadership, and how can I be of service wherever I'm at. And when it comes to working in a team, whether you're officially a leader in title and promotion or not, we can all be leaders of ourselves and of the work that we're doing. And it really does start with us. And so I've started with with myself. How can I improve and have that sort of Kaizen, constant, steady improvement mentality in how I'm working, and seeing it as I'm in competition with me and only me, so that we can all grow. And so not every environment might think or feel that way. And that's why I feel like it's also very important that whatever company you're with, you are very much aligned with the values there, and that there's a cultural seat at the table for you, not just a skills and ability seat. Otherwise, it can be very challenging to try to make inroads and make that kind of progress and be recognized for the value that you do bring.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more about what you've just said. I think it's really important that all those things, that you are aligned with the values and of the business, and that you bring to the table your best self. I think that's so important. Now, I want to ask you, Rebecca, about some strategies for creating and managing high performance teams in remote settings and in hybrid settings as well. How do we do that? What are some actionable steps that we can take?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? There's a privilege to being remote, and I absolutely love it. I also know that it's not for everyone. And so you have to understand that for some folks who are a little bit more acclimated to it, it can be a lot easier, especially if you're really good at time management and you're organized and you have a personal home environment, or maybe you rent space outside of the home, but you have some kind of environment where you can focus and be your best self. And then there are other folks who might be thrust into a remote or hybrid situation, and they actually prefer being in an office. So you don't want to dismiss them, or make them feel they're isolated from the team. But either or, whichever sort of area you fall into, you can still feel a little bit of that isolation. So and it can be harder for managers and anyone who's leading people, specifically leading people, not just themselves. It can be a little bit hard to build that relationship and that connection and the accountability. And I feel like a lot of folks who aren't maybe as skilled or aren't opening themselves up to some of the different strategies and tactics out there default to a micromanagement stance. And while there's a higher level, I think, of communication that's necessary and required when you're remote, ultimately, the stronger and simpler that your systems are for holding your team accountable, and of course yourself, the easier it's going to be to have that connection with people. So, I like to start with the idea of you can't create in chaos, and you have to have structure. And this goes for any business, right? But making sure that you have very clear processes as the umbrella for your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, and making sure that when you're onboarding new team members, there's very clear structure. There's an element of some automation, which is great to save leadership time and energy and save the person who's onboarding from having to be on Zoom or on any other kind of Teams platform, because that can get very exhausting. Zoom fatigue is real. And then there's an element where you need to have some of those online, we'll call them in person, even though you're not physically in person, but real-time calls where you're helping coach that person, having them see what you're doing and then practice and then teach back to you what they have learned, and making sure that you're providing them a communication channel. We use Slack, for example, at FMO Media, and our Slack channels are very organized and focused. We have a couple of team channels, but even those team channels where it might feel a little bit more like a free-for-all, it's very clear what the focus and what the topics are in that channel so that people don't get lost in communication while ultimately trying to be those Uber communicators. And then having some other guidelines when it comes to communication as well. So one of our rules is making sure that we are not side chatting or direct messaging, if you will, any other team members about the work that you're doing, because we can miss things in direct messaging. And I've seen it happen where two team members fail to include other team members in the appropriate channel, and then work gets lost, clients get lost along the way, their deliverables are mishandled. So we're very clear about how we want our team to communicate. We're very clear about how we show up for each other and our clients too. So making sure that we're visible on camera. Not to say, Rose, that we don't have times where, I need to turn my camera off, the dog's barking, or give me a second, I need a quick bio break. We're all human. We're very reasonable with that. But I actually read recently too that teams who are visible on camera in remote situations, they perform 80% better than teams who shut their camera off and are disconnected visually from their team members. So that's something that we've always held. So, if I'm going to break it down, a lot of it comes down to communication. Being really consistent in how you operate as a team doesn't mean that you can't change, because change is a constant, but being consistent and being reliable with your team too. And then having really strong time management and Rose, this would go for hybrid. This goes for in person. It goes for any mode of work, right? It's really important that we're managing our time well because time is one of our greatest resources and it's finite. So we need to make sure that we're adding the value, we're not burning out. And yeah, I hope that most people would feel this way, that I don't want to spend any more time in meetings than I absolutely have to. Some of us might like meetings, and that's okay. But I want people to be able to have a break from that as well. So evaluating where's your time going, where's your team time going, and being as organized as possible because you are working with folks who are in different locations. You don't have necessarily company issued computers or at least the ability to see everything that's going on in their computer. So ensuring that there's standards for how you organize files and any type of cloud sharing activity. I know that's a lot and we could go down any path, but what are some of your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think having, really strong processes in place and having those SOPs is really, really important, especially when, you have new staff coming on board. I think, and having those standards that are across the board and that everyone understands them and aligns to them. Because, things, as you say, things go missing. There are, chances of, losing clients or customers because, someone's, forgotten to do something. But if they've got an SOP in place or a process, they understand what's required of them. And, and working remotely can be, quite challenging for some people. Because, they may be used to, being in the office and, they have that human interaction where working remotely it can be, quite daunting because, you're sitting in an office or you're sitting in your home space or remote space, solo. And so sometimes, you need a sounding board and you don't have that, when you work remotely. So I think that, having strong processes is really, really important.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. Having community, it's very possible to build a strong community online. That's part of what digital marketing is about, right? So when it comes to your team, making sure that they feel seen and appreciated, and that can be something as small as a company shout out when they're doing something really great and acknowledging that. Making time for one-on-ones and making sure that they know who they can go to when they are feeling that isolation. I'm always going to encourage anyone to get a pet if you if you do work alone or at home, if that's for you. I know not everybody has the means to do that. But having at least something in your space, whether it's a pet or some comfortable items around you, fun desk and fun backgrounds, that can make a world of difference too when you're creating that working environment and really making it your own.
Absolutely. No, and I think, it's for those that do work remotely and that isolation can be, a bit draining on your mental health as well. So, the leaders in the team need to be aware of that and they need to look for signs that, someone is being impacted by that isolation.
Yeah, that's another great point. We have we call them digital detox days. And every 6 months, we ensure that team members take an extra 2 days off over a weekend. We give them a time frame for when they can choose that. And that's for practical purposes. Otherwise, Rose, we'd have everybody off and nobody would be available. So we stagger it. And it's from everybody's start date. So it's technically staggered for the most part anyway. And that gives everybody a chance to decompress, go off, do something fun, be with family, whatever it is absolutely up to them. Of course, what they do with their personal time, but that's kind of helped build in that culture of health and mental health and awareness that we have to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. We can't pour from an empty cup. And especially when you're in a digital marketing role as well as a digital workspace, it can get very draining when you're looking at screens all day and you're interacting with people online and your work is online. It can get very, very challenging. And the other thing, one of the things I do for all of our onboarding team members is make sure that they have a lunch in their calendar when we're setting up their calendar first and foremost, because that can be a big question. Even I remember even jobs in person and wondering, what's the lunch standard? When does everybody, do we all take it together? How do we all go out? Do people eat in? And so I want to make sure that team members know that taking breaks, eating an actual lunch, however you do that, that it's okay and that it's recognized and it's important, having little breaks throughout the day. Some other things I like to be mindful of too, just the holiday season, whatever holidays you're celebrating as a company or giving people off for in unison, making sure that in those shorter weeks that the work is manageable and that you're not overextending your team. That's not to say we're going to be perfect and catch everything, but in those types of weeks, especially week between Christmas and New Year's Eve, I like to limit our calls as much as possible. If people want one-on-ones, then absolutely, I'll be happy to meet with you, but I would rather give you as much of your time back so you can work on your most important essential job duties and have a little bit more of a relaxing time, less time on camera, and produces, I think, a happier environment and less stress in what is somewhat times a more stressful period, whatever is happening, work or personal life.
Yeah, and leaders and managers need to be aware too. I mean, in Australia, we have a law here that uh, employees and team members are allowed to disengage. So when they are, if their job is 9 to 5, from 5 o'clock onward, the employer, unless it's absolutely vital and critically important, are not allowed to contact their team member or their worker to do work outside of their normal work hours, unless it's been a pre-arranged agreement. What are your feelings on that? That so comes to the weekend, the person's off, and the employer says, can you do this by Monday, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it does depend on obviously the country and what sort of labor laws are in place and then what the situation is too. So for most of our team members, they're salaried exempt, and they can, and sometimes they do put in what we call overtime hours, and it's really about the work. So because it's a remote environment and there's a lot of privilege there, I don't know if a team member is taking extra 2 hours off in the afternoon to maybe go to the park with their kids, or they're getting house chores done throughout the day. If they are using some of their morning or afternoon time for that and they're getting their work done, and we also track what a reasonable amount of work is. We also time block our calendars so that we have that fit into our calendars. And if something happens where they schedule a dentist appointment, they know that they have to get their work done within reason, of course. But having that remote flexibility also means that they're a little bit more motivated to make sure that their work is getting attended to. Nothing is falling by the wayside, because we have that flexibility in both directions. So I would say absolutely, I think it's important to make sure that team members know if you're messaging on Slack that you're not expecting an answer right away. If it's after a certain time frame, my team knows that. Sometimes my team will respond back to me, because we also know sometimes our leaders are up late working because they're running the business and they need to put in the extra effort to make sure people are taken care of. In digital marketing, especially in our sort of formative years as a startup, we would put in some of that extra time because our clients needed us, especially the clients who are in hospitality. And so that was we were very upfront with that because we want to make sure people coming into the team knew, hey, we have clients who work over the weekend. They barely get any days off. So keeping that in mind, you might get some communication from them. And that's where proactive communication comes into play. So if anyone on our team is taking off, they're up for a vacation, or they're on some type of maternity or paternity leave, I like to make sure that we have proactively planned out what a system is to make sure that the work is covered. They can go off and have a stress-free vacation or time off, and we have everything clearly communicated and handled. And when you're a little bit more proactive with that and your time management, then you don't get into that trap of having to work later or longer hours or work over the weekend. And then it becomes more so a choice if you want to get caught up versus getting stuck in a cycle of constantly having to work to catch up because you weren't managing your time middle of the week. And some of the examples that I've run into, a lot of times when people come to me and they say that there's too much work, they can't handle it. Oftentimes it's because I'll go to their calendar and I'll find they haven't been managing their day to day, and they haven't been clear with what their priority is for that day. And when we lose sight of what our priority is, and when we lose sight of what our week needs to look like and what is actually within our control, that's when we can fall into bad working habits. So to your point, I absolutely agree. I think it's really important for your team to know that just because you're emailing them at 9 o'clock at night, because that's when you choose to maybe do some extra work as a manager, as a leader, they're not necessarily obligated to respond to you. I'm saying necessarily because I know there are some industries like medical field or lawyers. There are some folks, at least in the US, who are working later and they might have different kinds of obligations. I like to share that in digital marketing, there's very rarely an actual emergency, definitely not a life-threatening emergency. I'll knock on wood because I haven't seen it yet. But when it comes to that type of work, we absolutely can be very proactive and we can be very intentional with our time and communicate to your team what those expectations are at the very least, so they know what kind of environment they're getting into, and they know what kind of working dynamic. And that will help clear up a lot of frustration, anyone who might be disgruntled about the dynamic of a team or of an office. And then you're going to be able to have a much healthier work environment too, because people aren't burnt out. They don't feel like they're on the clock 24/7. And that also, Rose, I would add, and you can probably imagine I could go on and on about this topic because I am, but I think it's also really important for leadership to be keeping a finger on the pulse for how their employees are managing the work, because whether it's a calendar and a time blocking issue, or the other side of that I've seen is a training issue, and the team member either wasn't trained on how to actually move forward in their work, and so they get stuck and they hit a roadblock, and instead of pushing past, they might shut down on you and it might take them longer to move through that. So you really have to get insight and ask your team members individually, maybe sometimes as a group, hey, how can I help you? Where are you feeling stuck? What can I do to support you? Because that's where you might find some either misalignment with what the priority is for them and their role. You might also find that you didn't really train them well enough, or that there is some type of time organization management that needs to be addressed. Maybe they're not adhering to your SOP, and so it's taking longer and there are delays. So there could be a couple of different factors there as well, but all really important as a leader to have an understanding that it's not simply that people don't want to do work or that they are feeling overworked. It could be a number of things, and it's your responsibility to take care of your people and set them up for success, just as it's their responsibility to communicate and be that person who is taking ownership over their role and their work.
Yeah, love that answer. Absolutely spot on. I think it depends on the team, depends on the environment, depends on the industry. And people should be allowed to disengage when it is appropriate. I wanted to move on to fostering inclusive work environments in the remote setting. How do we do that? How do we contribute to team success and innovation?
Yeah, that can be another great challenge. We have a global team now, and it's just been so cool to have folks from other countries join the team. And one of the bigger priorities when helping them onboard was making sure they felt extremely integrated and a part of the team, no matter geographic location. And so we hired people who are comfortable working our Eastern hours, Eastern Standard hours, and that goes for our whole US team too. So we have folks who are in California California, folks who are in New York, and all the way in the middle. And then we have folks from around the globe. And so making sure they were comfortable and working those hours and making sure that they understood that that was for a specific reason, so that our clients can guarantee when we're at our desks, so to speak, and available. And that helps for better team alignment. And then there's a balance between making sure that different cultures are celebrated, and even so far as, Australia, you mentioned, has different working rules and regulations, making sure that we're in compliance with whomever we're hiring, and also acknowledging the cultural differences too. So some of our global team members celebrate different holidays, and they're not celebrating all of ours. So instead of forcing them to take off during our holidays and missing their holidays, we're very mindful of that. And even some of those holidays are updated every year, so we keep tabs on that. Making sure that people are not just sharing a little bit more about themselves, but asking and being curious, genuinely curious, to get to know them. We had Mother's Day recently here in the US, and it's Mother's Day in some other countries, same day around the globe. And so sharing different traditions, how we celebrate our moms and the mother figures in our life, whether it's Christmas or New Year's, whatever that holiday might be. Maybe there are different recipes and foods that different team members like to eat. And that can go for, someone who is living out in California to New York. We all have different traditions. So finding ways to come together and celebrate the differences, and find where we also align too, which is really great. And usually it comes down to those company values. And that's why we're all working at the same company, because we align on those values. And I think being curious and getting to know your team members and making sure they feel like they have a voice too, Rose. And that really goes for anyone. But if you are looking to foster an environment of innovation, it's really important for people to know that they can come and share feedback in a respectful way, right? There's still a reasonable, respectful way that I would certainly want to receive feedback. I'd also be expected to give it reasonably and respectfully too. So making sure you have that respectful environment, and then fostering that innovation is making sure people don't feel like they're going to be punished if they make a mistake. And I'm sure we've all been in some kind of situation in our work or our personal life where we feel like we can't make a mistake, but we are not perfect. We're flawed humans, and practice makes progress. So we have to really practice at finding ways of being resourceful, inventing new technology or new ways of doing something for that improvement. And I believe a lot of that not only starts with leadership, but the mindset of that Kaizen. How are we constantly, steadily improving? And so team members who are new or already acclimated to the culture and the environment, if they know that this culture celebrates gaining knowledge and trying new things and finding better ways to do something for the betterment of our work and the value we give to our customers, our clients, and each other, then it ceases to become about me inventing or innovating or what I like, but more so how am I serving the work that we're doing, the team that we're doing that with and working with, and the clients that we're helping too. But it can be a tall order for some folks, and it certainly will be met with challenges, right? So having systems in place for even innovation and creativity, like I said, you can't really create in chaos. You have to have that structure. And even brainstorming situations, they can get a little out of hand if there isn't someone there to guide and to give that framework. So having that, I like to say simple systems, because if you're looking to grow, the more complex your system, the more complicated it can be for team members to understand what's expected and how to move through that system. So keep your system simple so that it's scalable, and offer that structure and that framework so that people know what's expected, eliminate any of that anxiety around mistakes and failure, and celebrate your people. When people are coming up with new ideas and new inventions and new innovations, make sure that they get recognized for that, because we can't motivate people. It's not possible for me to motivate you, Rose, but I can set you up in a condition and environment where your motivation is nurtured and you can carry that momentum forward.
Absolutely. No, I think that you made some really, really valid points about, holidays and celebrations, and being able to do that in different ways, and making sure that that we are looking at fostering inclusivity into our workplaces, whether it's remote or in person, is really, really important, I think, because we're not all the same. And we celebrate things in different ways, and allowing for that within an organisation is so important, I believe. And it doesn't matter where you are, and be mindful that you're not fostering an environment where people aren't included for whatever reason. And it's really important that that we include people that are a little bit different from how we are personally, and make sure that we are allowing them to be different in their own way.
Absolutely.
Now, if you want to find Rebecca, you can find her on LinkedIn at Rebecca Vickers. And also tell me about your podcast, greatleaderspodcast.com.
Yeah, so I started the podcast about a year ago, but I didn't really start recording episodes till about 9 months ago. It's called Bad Bosses, Great Leaders. And we're not here to bash any of our bosses, past or present. We want to make sure that we're recognizing we all have the potential to be a bad boss, and we probably have been at some point. And even the folks that have led us in the past who maybe didn't do as great a job of it, they probably didn't have a good example set for them. So we want to highlight the great leaders, the great behavior, and the practices that can make great leaders, and bring awareness to some of the toxic and negative environments or behaviors and attitudes that can make a work environment really stressful. And I would also say you can take that into your personal life as well with your friends and family, because we can be great leaders in our personal lives as well as our work lives. So I love interviewing guests who are really crushing it in the leadership space, who have a lot to say and can give some practical and really value-driven applications to how we can be better leaders in our own life. So we'd love for folks to check it out. It's greatleaderspodcast.com. I put out an episode every week roundabout, and I'm always looking for new guests, but I want to make sure that I'm adding value to anyone who's looking for that leadership role and aspiring to be a great leader too.
Yeah, and there are so many criteria to be a great leader. And I think if to be a great leader is different than being a manager, in my mind anyway. You manage people, which is different, but to lead a team or to lead yourself, you have to have a certain set of skills, I think, to be able to do that. And being a great leader is not micromanaging, that's for sure. I think you have to lead by example. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I heard someone say recently the difference between being a manager and a leader is really about managing work and tasks versus leading people. And so if you are in a position where you're responsible for people and their well-being and how they move through their own tasks, then you're absolutely right. We have to be there to serve them and to support them and remove the roadblocks for them so that they can do their best work. And Rose, that's where some of the pitfalls come into play, because we might be really good at our job and doing the work and then get promoted and put into a leadership position and have no clue how to lead and support people really well. So that's my hope and aspiration for the podcast, that it can provide some of those folks who are just taking, learning the ropes and taking it day by day, how to be a better leader and how to, well, we still use the term manage people, but work with people and really collaborate with people, so that it's for the health of the whole company, right? But so that they can feel really good about the support that they're giving. And for those folks that are managing tasks, it is no easy feat, right? It can be just as challenging and hard So providing folks who are considered managers with some tools to be leaders too, because I think everybody can shine in those roles. And like I said earlier, we can be leaders of ourselves, and that's where it starts with us. And how do we lead ourselves? How do we lead the work that we're doing? And we can start practicing today. You don't have to be responsible for people to do that.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. Rebecca, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to sharing this episode with my audience. And I'm sure that they will find heaps of value in what you've discussed with us today.
Thank you, Rose. It's been a great opportunity.
Bye for now.
Bye.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time.